Hey, in this video we'll see how to use LUA in YAG. First of all, it's a complicated subject that can't be easily done in a few minutes, so I will cover only the very basics here. For more detailed information, don't forget you have the API documentation. As a short reminder, this LUA business is just a way to allow us to communicate with YAG and change its behavior through a scripted language that is called LUA. Using this language, we can automate many things like the character sheets, or modify the dice rules, or display what we want in the journal, things like that. So in short, we can prepare completely custom rule sets and behaviors for pretty much any game. But of course it will require some scripting, so if you're not into that, you can safely skip this video. With all that said, I'm now assuming you know the bare minimum about scripting and LUA. So every time we start YAG, it will prepare what's needed for the default usage of LUA. It will create and overwrite the LUA directory in which all the magic will take place. So let's bring YAG on the scene. So the first time, this directory contains only the default rule set, which is called default, and the documentation directory, which contains the detailed API documentation in PDF. But of course we can add as many new rule sets as we wish in this directory. By the way, those two directories being overwritten at each start never ever work directly on them, because you will lose your work every time. So the very first thing that we want to do is to create a copy and work on it, and this one will never be modified by YAG. For example, we're going to duplicate the default rule set and modify it a bit. Let's call it tutorial. First of all, we have to inform YAG of the rule set we're using, and it's done here in the LUA panel. So I'm going to write tutorial, and you can see that YAG now tells us here the files it's using for LUA. Those files are defined in the only mandatory file in the rule set, which is the ruleset.conf file here. It contains two mandatory variables, one for the main file used by YAG, and one for the path to look for modules. It also contains three optional variables, but I won't talk about them because they are not so important, and it's in the documentation anyway. So what happens exactly when we need LUA is that YAG always calls this very script LUA file, which is called YAG LUA here. And depending on how it's called from YAG, a different function will be called in the script. At the time of this recording, three functions are used by YAG and must be present in the script. More might be available when you watch this video, but the principle will not change. So this one, character sheet update, is called when we update a character sheet, which is done by clicking on this button here. And this function here will be called when we roll dice, which is done by clicking the buttons with dice icons here and here. Dice rolling is done in two parts in YAG. So first we roll the dice, and this function will be called. Then YAG reads the results and sends them back to this callback function, so we can do what we want with them. So that's the way YAG talks to us. But we have to talk back to it, and it's done by an object called YAG that contains various functions, like writing in a journal, rolling dice, clearing them, modifying pawns, and so on. So all of that is detailed in this documentation, so I'm just going to give you some very simple example, just so you understand the principles. So For example, let's write something in the journal every time the script is called. I'm going to copy this function here. Let's modify it, and you can see that now every time I'm calling the LUA script, I get this message calling LUA that I asked for. Now I'm going to ask every function to tell us when it's called, and I'm going to comment what they're doing so we can just see exactly what's going on. This one is doing nothing, so I can just let it like that, and you can see that when I call, now that I have saved, when I call this, when I click this button, I'm calling the YAG character sheet update function, as you can see here. Alright. When I roll a dice, I'm calling the roll dice button function, as you can see here. The callback is currently never called because the dice are not rolled, so I'm going to roll the dice, and you can see that now after the roll dice button function has been called, the callback function is now called. Okay, but the callback function is doing nothing, so I'm going to uncomment this one, and when I click on this button again, the dice are rolled, the callback function is called, and it's taking care of the reroll and displaying the results in the journal, as you can see here. So as you can guess, everything is happening in the default module here. So we're going to have a look at this module now. You can see it's a short and quite simple script. So you can see now that the character sheet update function is really doing nothing. So using this rule set, we can't automate the modification of the character sheets. We would have to put some code in here. So this one is really doing nothing. The roll dice button function is a bit more interesting. You can see that it starts by cleaning the dice, and it also making the first roll here. Alright, and that's it. Then the really clever function in this code is the callback function. It's the one that is doing everything pretty much. So first of all, it's the one that will take care of the reroll here. It's also the one that will update pawns, for example here, modifying the initiative of a pawn when it has been rolled. And finally, it's the one that is displaying the message, the results, in the journal. So just to show you very simply, we are going to modify the message, calling final grand results here, and we're going to add something here. For example, yay, great roll. So I'm going to save, and now when I roll the dice, the roll dice button function is called, the callback is called, and display the result with our modifications, grand result and yeah, great roll. Alright, so one last thing. LUA is run only locally, so every connected computer must have its own copy of the rule set. So when your rule set is ready, you just have to zip it and send it to your friends so they can copy it in their directory and unzip it in their own LUA directory. Alright, I think that's it. I'm going to stop the video here. I hope it was interesting. Thanks very much for watching it, and hope to see you in the next. Bye.